Hello, welcome to another edition of WaveLab Workflows. My name is Justin, and today we're going to talk about adding metadata to your rendered files from WaveLab Pro. And I know metadata is probably not the most fun subject of mastering, but I do think it's important, and depending on where you're sending the files and what you're doing with them. And I'm going to show you how to do that with the audio montage and the audio editor. Now, metadata is kind of a misunderstood subject because if you're only thinking about submitting your songs to CD Baby or DistroKid, TuneCore, The Orchard, if you're really only focused on that, then to be honest, it doesn't even matter if the files have metadata, because those digital distributors at the time of this video, they do not read any of that metadata. So you can put literally anything you want in there and they're not going to read it. Whoever sets up the release is going to have to re-enter all the information manually. So to some degree, you could say that metadata doesn't matter, but there's a whole lot of reasons where it does matter. And that's why I like to just embed it and get it correct and accurate, and then it's in the files, and then I can tell my clients that it's in the files. Everybody's happy. And there's going to be times where that is and isn't useful. But again, I just think, why not get it correct if you have the information? It's very easy to do in WaveLab. You can do it in WAV files, MP3, AAC, all sorts of different formats. And it all kind of derives from CD text. So if you're saying, I don't make CDs anymore, that's okay. You still use CD text as sort of the portal of entry for this information. And it gets really easy to just push it out as metadata when you render the files. So I'm going to get a couple things together here before we really dive in. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. If there's any technical issues, please feel free to tell me in the chat, because I would appreciate that. But so far, everything seems good. So we're going to dive in pretty quickly. I also wanted to mention that CD text and metadata are not the same thing. They do contain basically the same information, the artist name, the song titles, the ISRC codes, but they're technically two different formats. It's kind of apples and oranges. And as I mentioned in WaveLab, I use CD text as the main point of entry, which is easy to populate, and then I use a metadata preset to make sure that the same information and more gets put in the WAV files. And there are times when that is useful. I know I explained when it's not useful, but if you think of cases like music licensing, when you're sending these WAV files directly to a music supervisor or an agency, I think it's a great idea to have some metadata in the file, so whoever receives them can see who it is, get some basic information. I'm going to show you all the fields that you can populate, and I'll show you the ones that I just kind of do by default for my normal mastering projects. If you think of Bandcamp, you can download a variety of formats from Bandcamp, but if you download the original master WAV files, then it's actually pretty great to have the metadata in there, because whoever downloads those files is going to see it. I think for future proofing, it's a great idea, because you just never know. I just think it makes the files look more professional. The other area where I think it's actually most useful right now today for albums and EPs is for download cards. If your clients are pressing vinyl or making cassettes, a lot of times they include a download card so that whoever purchases the vinyl or cassette can still have a digital copy. And with those services, it's different than a streaming service. With the download card services, they simply host the files that you give them and nothing else. So you want to make sure that the files are presented how you want them to be when you use a download card service. So you want to have the metadata, the artwork. You want it to look like a legitimate album when whoever downloads it. You don't want it to be a big mess, and you want it to look nice when they put it in their media player of choice. I'm going to pause and read a question. I agree with that comment. There's all sorts of web players. There's so many ways that metadata can be important in files, and it's only going to get better and more important. So when you hear somebody argue that metadata doesn't matter because the CD babies and distro kids of the world don't read it. You got to think bigger than that. And it also depends on your client base. A major label or a big record label, they may have somebody in-house that's going to handle all that. But a lot of my clients are independent bands and artists, and they don't really know how to do this. They don't want to know how to do it. They just want it taken care of. So I asked them for the information. I put it in the files. It's done. End of story. It's very easy to do in WaveLab. So I'm going to stop talking about it and show you how to do it. But I did want to mention download cards. Those are a big thing, at least with independent bands, where people can download MP3s and have the artwork and it'll look like a legitimate release. So today I'm not going to focus really on any mastering sonic type things. So I'm going to skip over that. But, I guess let me start with the quick way. If you are watching this video because you want to add metadata to a file, you can open a file in the audio editor, which is right here. And you can go to the metadata tab and click edit. And there's all sorts of metadata categories. ID3 version 2 is probably the most widely used. But there's all these other ones up here. Cart, riff, ID3 version 1, which is older with less options. You can add the artwork and lyrics. So you can do this one by one and type in something here. Whatever you want. I'm not going to save it. You could type in some stuff. Press OK, and then you'll notice you have to resave the file. It's not going to change the audio. But that would be really tedious to do if you're a busy mastering engineer and you want to put metadata in all your files. It would be impractical to do that for every song. So that's how you do it. If you're just looking to do this one time and never think about it again, you can open a file in the audio editor and click metadata and get all these choices. That's kind of a one-time solution. But let's talk about incorporating it into your mastering workflow. So you really, honestly, I never even think about metadata because it's so automatic. And the only time I open the metadata tab in a session is to add the artwork, because artwork is always going to be specific to the project, but everything else is sort of automated and automatic. So let's do a quick walkthrough. I just made a new audio montage at 96K, kind of my default thing here. And these are my captures from analog. I'm just going to do a really quick, I'm going to pretend this is the sequence of the record. Actually, let's simulate a real project. I forgot I made this little note here. So this is the band name and their album name and the song titles in order. So they got this song, that one. So I've put the songs in the desired order, of the record, which is good. And these are the CD or the insert audio file settings I like to use. So I'm going to press OK. Of course, I'm not going to get into mastering too much, but if you needed to add more space between the songs, this is where you would listen to it and do that, or less space, however you need to do it. These are my captures from analog, so they have 200 milliseconds of silence, total silence built into the header. The start of the track, which comes in handy for when I have those track markers added. There's a little buffer between the start of the track and the downbeat. But let's say that's great. First thing you'd want to do is save the montage. And again, I have a very specific folder structure for reasons like this. When I go to save the montage, it picks a logical place to store that montage. And then I have the band name and album title easily selectable, so I can copy, paste. And then I have a keyboard shortcut using copy and paste. It's a third-party app, but that puts this string of text there. This tells me this is my main master. The bit depth of the processing, 96K is the sample rate. It's digital master. Version 1, and then the underscore tells me that it's the master session with all the plugins, if I were to use plugins. Again, I'm going to skip plugin processing just so I can have faster rendering times when I show you this stuff. But obviously, there's plenty of videos where I go over mastering, inserting clip effects, track effects, montage output effects. Again, not going to cover that today. So let's say I've got the songs arranged how I want them to sound as far as spacing between them, all that good stuff. You've seen me do it the fast way with Stream Deck, but the first step here would be to add CD markers, and you can do that with the CD wizard. I'm going to do it the slow way. And forgive me because I never do it the slow way, but there's an icon here called CD wizard. And if you're using my settings, I believe it's Shift sorry, it's Control C brings up this window. And of course I have this Montage was a template. So in that template is already my correct CD wizard settings. And I'll pause here if anyone wants to copy them or see them. But basically what it's doing is it's going to create a marker for each song, a CD marker. And again, if you're saying I never make CDs, CDs are dead, forget about that. Everything's based around the CD concept here, even if you're only making WAV files for digital distribution. Just bear with me there. So this is the CD wizard settings I use. Creates a marker at each song, quantizes it to the CD frame, which may or not be important to you. If I wanted to, I could add the first ISRC code right now, but I'm going to do it later because sometimes it ends up happening later. I'll show you that way you know how it would be done later. But if you knew the first code, you could check that box and put it in. So I'm going to press apply and save it. And as you can see, it's created markers at each song, at the start of each song for me. I'll zoom in a little closer here. The first marker, I'll go to the markers tab so you can see a little better. The first marker looks different. That's because it's a CD track start marker. To be a valid montage for most intents and purposes, the first marker needs to be a CD track start marker. You'll notice the rest of them look a little different. It's called the splice marker. And what that is, it's an end marker and a start marker basically glued together, which makes your life easier. Sometimes I see people with an end marker and a start marker, and there's a big space between the two. And then I don't want to say that's bad, but it's easy for that to cause minor issues and annoyances. So splice markers are the way to go. That's part of why I choose these options up here. Use splice markers. So this marker was created at the start of the next clip, but also it's offset because I chose to quantize to the nearest CD frame, which again is nice for CD compatibility if you care about that. I tend to find a workflow that works for everything, whether a project's going to be CD, digital, or just digital or vinyl. I mean, I prefer to quantize the markers so there's no surprises later, because if you don't quantize the markers and you go to make a DDP at some point, even if the client in 3 months says, oh, we decided to make CDs now. If you didn't quantize the markers, when you make that DDP, it's going to quantize them by default, and then you may have some markers shifted by a few milliseconds. And that could be a surprise, can change the track length by a fraction of a second. So I always quantize everything to start from just to be safe. And I know this looks a little suspicious, but it's all dead space. I could, in a normal situation, I would have some more space between the songs like that. So let's requantize. If you ever need to requantize, you can go to the CD wizard and choose my quantize only option. It requantizes them. Fun stuff. So basically, it's made a marker, a CD splice marker at every clip. And then again, the very last marker looks different. That's an end marker. So a montage basically has to start with a CD track start marker. Can have splice markers for all the songs, and then it has to end with a CD track end marker. It's pretty simple, but kind of specific. So, and as you'll notice, the markers were automatically named based on the file names, which I find to be very handy because I name all my captures from analog exactly what the song is called. Sometimes it gets tricky if there's special characters. I have to come up with a workaround temporarily. You know, if there's a slash or a bizarre character, I'll dumb it down and address it later, which I'm going to talk about. But for the most part, the files are pretty cleanly named. It's a great starting point. So now that I've got the markers, you know, there's a reason that I do it in this order. So just kind of bear with me because it makes your life very easy. And if I'm not talking about it, I could probably do this in about 45 seconds or less, but I'm doing it slowly so I can explain it, but it's all very quick and easy. So I got those markers created. The next thing to do is to add CD text. And you're probably saying, I don't make CDs. CDs are dead. Well, just pretend that they're not and add some CD text. So to do that, again, I have a shortcut for this, which is Shift and the letter T. But if you go to the CD tab, there's this box called Edit CD Text. And that brings up this CD text box. Now you can fill it in. I'll show you 2 ways to do this. And again, part of why I name my projects this way, I have a little shortcut, copy to clipboard, name without extension, which for me is just Control N. So I've just copied the name of this montage, which is going to come in handy. I'm going to open the CD text editor, and there's pages to it. There's a page for the album itself, and then there's pages for each song. And right now it's empty. So the fast way to populate this is like that. I'm going to paste that in. Of course, I don't want all that, but since the album title is Candlestick Park, I can delete everything else. The band name is The Victorians. I can delete everything else. Now with one click, I can populate the band name, which is Performer, to all the songs. And if I skip to page 1, which is track 1, and press this button over here, it's going to populate the song titles to the CD text title, the marker names. And you're going to notice here on track 3, there's a question mark. If you ever see a question mark, it's because it's an illegal character for CD text. CD text is, for the most part, restricted to ASCII characters, which is a very small and safe character set. And this is so that on your car stereo and other CD players, that it doesn't display some kind of error or gibberish. Now you can bypass that and put whatever you want as CD text, but there's a very good chance whoever inserts that CD is going to have some kind of problem. So for CD text, I play it safe. And if you'll notice, I'll zoom in here, the song, and I picked this one on purpose, the song title had a little accent over the A. That's what the artist wanted. And of course, we can put that in the metadata, so that's why I'm doing it this way. But for the CD text, we're going to have to dumb it down. We're going to replace that question mark just with a regular A. And again, this is just for CD text only. So that would be if you made a CD or DDP, it would have a simplified character set. But we can still do the special character in the metadata, and I'll show you why. So I'm using page up and down to just double check everything's correct. Double check that there's no blank spaces after a title. That can cause a problem later. We want clean and tight names. And you can fill in the songwriter, composer, arranger. I tend to find that only jazz and classical clients tend to care about this. So for the most part, I skip it. But it is there if you want to do it. So as you can see, I'm paging through to double check. Everything's good to go. And you can see my marker name still has that special character. I don't know how easy that is to see. If we go to the marker names, it's perhaps easier. So again, this is all done so quickly, just explaining it slowly. So now I've populated the CD text, and let me go back to my project sheet. They did provide me with the ISRC codes, and conveniently they are in numerical order. So what I can do is copy the first code. I can go back to the CD wizard and choose ISRC only. This is important. You want to make sure that you don't have other boxes checked. So that's why this preset has ISRC only checked. We wouldn't want to make new markers or change any markers or do anything else. We just want to add ISRCs. So I'm typing in the first code and pressing apply, and watch what happens here. It figured out that the rest of them go in numerical order. Now, if your codes are scrambled up, then you just have to go one by one and paste them in to the field. You can manually paste stuff. Obviously, that would be incorrect, but let me go back and just straighten them out again. CD wizard, ISRC only, put in the first code. Now we're good to go. So that's easy enough. UPC, I don't get a lot of UPC codes from clients, but if you have it, you can put it in up here. And as it mentions, if your code only has 12 digits, which is common in the US, first you type a 0 and then you paste the rest of the 11 digits. Now UPC is specific to the format of the release, so the CD version is going to have a different UPC than the digital release and the vinyl. So it's really only practical for the actual DDP if you're making one for your client if they're going to press CDs. I don't have it set up so that I have a lot of things that go into the metadata, but the UPC is not one because I do think there's not a huge use for that, and it's going to be different for CD, different for digital release, different for vinyl. So, but you can put it in if you're doing CDs and you have it. So that's the UPC code. UPC is one code for the entire release. ISRC codes are one code per song. So that's the difference there. So where are we at here? We got everything entered. Now, the reason this is all going to make sense is because in the metadata field, let me just make a new montage. Here's my new montage template. And in the template, all this stuff is pre-programmed. Like I said, ID3 version 2 is the most, I think, widely used field. So as you can see, it's taking the CD track title and putting that in the song title field. Now, I switched this around from WaveLab 10 for WaveLab 11. I used to base everything on CD text, but I was kind of annoyed with the special character issue I talked about because a lot of times songs have special characters in the names that don't fit the CD text specifications. So the developers added a few little tweaks and allowed me to do this. So instead of taking the CD text track title, this is taking just the marker name, basically, which is going to have that special character, and that's going to go in the metadata. Also taking the CD title right here. It's taking in the track performer this is kind of convoluted because it's called lead performer, but this is basically the artist name, and this is the track. Up here is the track artist name, so it could be a thing where it's a Beatles album, but song 3 is the Beatles featuring Mick Jagger, which would never happen, but you get the idea. If you have specific artist name for a specific track, that's going to take that into consideration for the metadata. It has the year, because why not? This is an important one, and it's not part of CD text, but it does grab it from the montage. It's going to embed the CD track number. I shouldn't have said CD. It's going to embed the album track number and the total number of tracks for that album. And that's important for media players. A lot of media players can read that. Now, I always name my files numerically, 01 song title, 02 song title, which helps keep them in order, but you can also add this little bit of metadata that some media players can latch onto, which is the track number and total number of tracks, which is useful. It's going to grab the ISRC code. Pretty self-explanatory. I used to have it in here, but I took it out because of all the tutorials I do, but you can put, mastered by so-and-so. There's so many fields that you could pre-program if you wanted to, beats per minute. It gets a little ridiculous. And that's just ID3 version 2. We have version 1, which is pre-populated again with some basic information from CD text. And again, I never even look at this unless I'm explaining how to do it because it's all pre-programmed and I never have to look at this. I want to talk about ISRC codes. People always say, I want to or I need to embed the ISRC code in my files. Again, I'm not going to, it's debatable how valid that is. For music licensing, it can be useful, important, required. For submission to DistroKid, it's not essential at all. There's a wide range of, there's not a one right answer, but I'm of the opinion of if you have the ISRC code, you should embed it. So again, this is set up to do that in ID3 version 2 metadata, but there is another place you can put ISRC codes. The EBU, European Broadcasters Union, they also attempted to come up with a standard for ISRC codes, and it's a little more abstract. It's in what's called the AXML chunk, and this looks like a lot of gibberish here, but believe it or not, if you know how to read code, which I don't, but you can kind of tell what's going on here, and you can see that within all this code, it's putting the ISRC in the AXML chunk, and there's certain pieces of software that only read that. I think Sonorous reads both now, but Sonorous is a popular mastering software for DDP creation. They make a special little app that only does ISRC. And again, I haven't kept up with the times, but there was a point in time where they only did AXML. They may have changed it to ID3 and AXML. So my point is you can put the ISRC code in more than one place. And I think the two that you have to worry about are ID3 version 2. As I mentioned, that's what more consumery apps are going to read. And then the AXML is a little bit more on the broadcast and professional side. But with this preset, it just goes to both places. CART is not a format I'm very familiar with, to be honest, but I just put the basics there because why not? So yeah, there's a bunch of different formats. And I have heard of cases where certain types of metadata will cause an error with the digital distributor. I can say that with the fields that I have set, I've never had an error. And I've heard of CD Baby rejecting files because there's some abstract metadata fields filled in. And I think that's true. For whatever reason, it trips up the system of a certain distributor. But again, years of doing this, I've never had anybody say there's a problem with my files because there was metadata in them. It's just not happened. It's only been a benefit for them to have this information in there, which I'll show you. And then, of course, the artwork, which is called Picture. I'm going to add that later, and I'll tell you why when we get to it. But I'm not going to worry about artwork right now. So again, this is all part of my new Montage template, so I never have to even open this or think about it. It's just there. When I create a new montage, it's just ready to roll. So again, that's why I say you don't really have to think about it. All you have to do is enter the basics, which you would anyways for CD text, and just for your sanity, so everything looks organized and you know what's what. I think it's good practice to enter the basic information in a correct manner in mastering, because at some point these details start to matter. And I'm pretty good about getting all the correct information before I even start a mastering project, because it's not that hard if you just ask. A lot of times people already know it. I have a form on my website that kind of makes people fill it out and think about it. So anyways, let's say, obviously we're happy with how this sounds. I'm not going to insert plugins so I can do faster renders, but I have entered in the information correctly. I'm just double checking my work. And it's not a bad idea to double check it. Like I said, you can page up and down very quickly through the CD text. You can see your markers. Everything's good to go. So this is where I am going to sort of dive into my rendering process as well, because it's all part of the package here. And my whole theory here is enter the information once and once only, and it goes everywhere. My whole reason for this particular way of entering it, which again you can do in less than a minute, is so that you only have to enter it one time, and it goes everywhere, whether it's a DDP, whether it's WAV files, MP3 files, anything like that. Do it once and forget about it. So let's say I'm happy with how this sounds, information's correct. I'm going to do my initial render, which is the first rendering preset called 00 initial montage render. And this is where it gets a little specific to my workflow, but I'm going to create a new, got a little bit lost here because I was doing something else, but in the folder for the project, I'm going to make a new folder called 96K renders. And this is how I like to name it. I just grab the band name, and I grab some form of the album title or abbreviate it. This is a pretty short one, so I'll keep it. And I call it version 1. So I like to name stuff for this reason, and again, you'll see why when we get downstream. But I think it's good to have some kind of naming scheme practice so that everything is kind of uniform. You don't have to think about what it is. So I'm rendering. Okay, and then as I've mentioned in other episodes, the first thing I do is render the entire montage as one long file. And that's because if you get into situations where songs are overlapping, let me just turn this fading setting off here because I don't like that. If you get into a situation where songs are overlapping, you'd probably do something more like this. And I can do it for this project too, I guess. If you get into situations like this, if you try to render track by track with clip effects and plugins, you're more than likely going to get a glitch when you put the master files back together at this point. If you render track by track with plugin processing, you're very likely to get a glitch. Now, as I mentioned, I usually have 200 milliseconds before the downbeat, but in the case of an overlap, 200 milliseconds is probably too much because you're going to get too much of the previous song. So that's when I go kind of tighter, and it's always going to be a little abrupt when you start it. You can try to find a zero crossing, but for the most part, it's never going to be the most beautiful transition ever. So anyways, my whole point, I got a little sidetracked, but I always render the full montage as one long file first, and then WaveLab recreates that. You don't have to re-enter any information. It's just a way to lock in all the processing without any potential glitches from the processing starting and stopping and starting and stopping and all this stuff. So one long thing. Again, this is all part of my render preset. We got whole montage over here. I'm rendering it to 64-bit float because if I were doing any plugin processing, which I normally would be, at least doing some limiting, sometimes more. Again, these are captures from analog, so we assume they sound pretty close. But anyways, if I were doing some processing, it would be happening at 64-bit float. So I'm not dithering yet. I'm just going to render this whole thing as one long file to this 96K renders folder within the project. And it should go pretty quick because there's no plugins happening, so that went really fast. So as you can see, we have a new montage now. If there were plugins in here, they'd of course all be gone. It's a clean montage, all the processing locked in, but it did copy over all the CD text information, marker names, etc. So it's basically the same montage, but with all the processing locked in. Again, just for safety, for you to double check, sometimes plugins are fine on rendering, sometimes plugins are fine on playback, but on rendering they produce a pop or a glitch. This is your chance to check that. Whether it's at the very start, whether it's at the very end of the montage, somewhere in the middle, it's your chance to verify your processing, which I know seems maybe redundant, but this is mastering and quality control matters. So I am going to, I have a little trick for this. I actually have a Stream Deck preset, which I can just press it. It's a little slower, but I don't have to do anything. But I'm going to toggle back to this montage, copy the name, and then toggle back to the new one. I'm going to change this to 2496 and remove the underscore. The underscore always tells me that it's the master one with all the processing. So if I look at my recent file list, I can spot it more easily. But I remove that because the processing is done. The only thing I'm going to add is a dither plugin, which, again, if I was doing real processing, this audio would be floating point, and I want to have a 24-bit dither. And that's inserted in the last in the montage output section. So anyways, all my stuff carried over. And what I can do here is choose 24-bit wave. Now I'm doing this a little bit, I'm actually doing it forward, but technically it's backwards because I usually don't send all the files till the client approves the project, and I don't send the high res first. But let's just start from the highest resolution and go down and see how this works out. Again, a little out of my element here because I'm working in a different direction. But obviously we're happy with how this sounds. This is a 96K montage with a 24-bit dither. WaveLab doesn't automatically dither. You have to tell it what bit depth you want to render to, and you have to insert the dither yourself. It's not going to just do it for you. So you got to be mindful of that. Steinberg with WaveLab 11, Steinberg introduced this Lin dither plugin, which I haven't had time to explore much myself. I've just been very busy, but it's a very good, high-quality dithering plugin with a lot of options like auto blanking, noise shaping. Again, I just haven't had time to work it into my workflow, so I'm going with my preset here. But anyways, my whole point is that now I can render wave files of each track. And when I do that, you'll notice the metadata preset also followed along. So I don't have to go in here and retype anything or fill anything out. It's just all coming from existing information. So I'm going to choose 24-bit wave tracks. And I need to render this to a specific folder. So what I like to do is copy the file name in the Files tab. There's a little shortcut. I copy the file name, I put it right here, and I just add some characters that make it make sense. 2496 Wave version 1. And now I'm rendering a wave of each track. Now, I didn't add the artwork. I tend to not add the artwork to WAV files because very few pieces of software can display it. And I think if anything is going to cause an issue in a WAV file, it could be artwork as far as a digital distributor goes. Because artwork, there's really no standard. I've had people send me like 33 megabyte artwork files, which is almost the size of a 16-bit WAV file. So that would defeat the purpose of, if you're going to make an MP3 and put a huge artwork file in it, it's going to be a huge file again. That defeats the purpose. So you do need to be mindful of the size of the artwork you're adding. And again, since very few media players can display artwork in WAV files, I just don't add it to the WAV files. I'm going to add it to the MP3 when we get down there. But for now, I've rendered 24-bit 96K waves. Now, this is where you don't need a third-party app to do any metadata work with WaveLab, but it's not a bad idea for double-checking, especially if you're just getting familiar with the process. So I have a program called Meta. I'm a Mac user. It's by Nightbird's Resolve. There's another program I think called, I forgot what it's called. There's another decent one for Mac that people use, Medactics, I think it's called. I use this one called Meta. It's $20. It's worth the investment. There's a bunch of them for Windows too. Kid 3 is, I think, a freeware one. Anyways, I'm going to load in those files just to show you what we got. And again, I really just use this for double checking. But if you load this, and if you don't use iTunes to check this, iTunes, well, Apple is getting a little better. iTunes is really not cut out for displaying metadata and WAV files. So if you are using iTunes to check this, you're probably going to not see much information. If you're using, and on a side note, iTunes does not read CD text. So if you burn a CD and you're wondering why iTunes doesn't recognize it, it's because it can't read CD text natively. There's a script, a guy named Doug. It's called DougsScripts.com. He makes a little script that converts CD text into CD information for iTunes and Apple Music, but by default, it won't read it. Anyways, here are the WAV files I just made from WaveLab. And as you can see, pretty flush with metadata. This is just the file name. That's actually not metadata, but you can see the artist name is the artist name. Each song has its correct title. And if you zoom in, the metadata inherited the accent over the A, but you'll notice the file name did not. And that's by design. WaveLab has a setting, if you go to Preferences, Global, Formats, it has a little box here that says Create Windows-Compatible File Names, and I have that on. And that's because Windows seems a little more picky when it comes to file names. It doesn't like files with question marks in them, accents. Also, it can't handle strange characters as well as Mac. And you might say, well, who cares? I'm a Mac user. But it does matter because some of the software and framework of the digital distributors could be Windows-based. So you could try to upload a file with a question mark in the file name and it might reject it, or a special character. In a real case scenario, this is a few years ago before I was aware of all this, I had an album when the song ended with one song ended with a question mark. And I was putting the question mark in the file name due to my rendering practices. And I zipped it up and I sent it out. And the guy kept saying, track 7 is missing when I opened the zip. And I would look at mine and say, what do you mean? It's in there. Or, check it out again. What happened? It turned out that he's a Windows user. And when he would unzip the zip file, which is a good way to send your files by zipping them, Windows was sort of ignoring that file with the question mark in it because it couldn't read it. So my whole point is I tend to render very safe file names. It takes out question marks. It takes out accents. It takes out special characters. Because again, it's just the file name. You want to keep those safe and clean. And the other thing you'll notice is the file names, due to my rendering settings, if you go back here, numeric prefix, this is all Again, part of the presets. It's so fast and easy to do. The file name is 01 song title, 02 song title. That keeps it in order. When you have just your basic Mac Finder, that keeps the files in order, so it doesn't give you a headache to look at it. But you'll notice the track number is not in the song title because we don't want the metadata to look ugly. We want the metadata to look really nice, like a normal album would. If you buy an album on Apple Music or iTunes, you don't see the track name. You don't see the track number in the song title. Or even if you stream on Spotify, you don't see the track number in the song title. So the metadata does not have the track number. The file name does. Of course, the metadata has the album name. And as you can see here, and I don't know why it got switched around, but in the metadata is the track number and track total, which is, again, some media players can read that, and the ISRC code over here on the right. So as you can see, all the metadata that I wanted is embedded in the WAV files, which is pretty cool. This is going to come in handy if you were a music supervisor and you got these files. You can see a lot of information about this music. I've even had people that are really license heavy have me put in the notes area. Let's go back to this. I've had people. There is a notes section. I've had people have me put their email address, their phone number, so someone can contact them. There's a big comment section over here. So you can kind of put anything you want. You can put a little message in there, and any kind of music supervisor is going to have a program that can read those fields. But for most bands and artists, what you see here is what I put in, just the basics. And again, we'll do the artwork in the MP3s, but for now, that's a really clean starting point. If someone were to upload those to Bandcamp or offer them as high-resolution files somehow, any good media player is going to read that. iTunes is kind of garbage for reading metadata. There's a good media player. I don't have it installed for some reason on this newer computer, but it's called JRiver Media Center. That's a really good media player that can read metadata. It's kind of a prosumer, more professional media player for double checking. This program doesn't play audio. It just looks at the metadata. So again, I'm kind of not working in my normal way, but I wanted to show you that before we get too far, that the files do have metadata built in, which is, I think, great. So let's work our way down here because, these are 24-bit 96K waves. Those are only useful for certain situations. But I want to show you how we don't have to re-enter the information anymore. It's all there. So I'm going to close this, I believe. Yeah, let's close Meta. Again, I just use this app for double checking. It's not required. I was going to say, the Mac Finder in Big Sur is getting a little better at displaying metadata. I don't want this to play because I don't know if I have the rights to it, but yeah, I can pause it. So as you can see, even the Mac Finder is going to show you some very basic information in the preview. And if you look in the other area, what else can it show? Well, I'm using a special Pathfinder, it's called. Let's go to the regular Mac Finder and see what we got. Regular Finder, column view, more. Well, this is a little unplanned, but basically the Mac Finder is getting better at reading metadata in WAV files. iTunes, I honestly haven't kept up with how good iTunes and Apple Music is doing, but it's not a great testing point, I can tell you that. You want to use an actual metadata app or a professional media player like JRiver Media Center. So we've got our high-res waves. That's great for certain situations, but how do we get down to 44.1 and all those other formats? I'm still personally using Isotope RX for sample rate conversion, only out of habit. WaveLab has great sample rate conversion built in. You could use the batch processor and convert it down to 44.1, but because I'm a creature of habit here, I'm going to do it with RX, and just to prove that you can use a third-party app. It's a great feature of WaveLab. Some people like to use Weiss. Sericon, but starting with WaveLab 9, I believe, the SOX algorithm is a great sample rate conversion tool. I would not be afraid to use it. I just have not had time to work it into my workflow. So, unfortunately, my special helper doesn't work with RX9 right now, so I can't use it. But I'm going to create a new folder called 441K renders right next to the 96K renders folder in my project. And that's because this file that I'm going to sample rate convert, it's going to have the same exact name. So I can't put it in the same folder because that won't work. So I'm going to create a new folder for the 44.1 version. And this is that whole floating, as you can see, it's a floating point wave. It's not dithered. It's 96K sample rate. It's the whole album. And this workflow works for singles, EPs, albums, the whole deal. I'll get this started and I'll tell you more. So this is my downsampling settings. So what I wanted to say is my workflow here is I've designed it so that it works for mastering singles, EPs, and albums of basically any variety, whether it's overlapping songs, not overlapping songs. I just want one thing that works well and covers all the bases. So that's why I'm doing it this way. So that's converting it down. And again, I don't have to redo anything. I'm going to tell WaveLab to recreate this montage using a new source file. And I can do it quickly with my Stream Deck. But the slow way, I forgot. The slow way is going to be extra slow because I always use these shortcuts. But we would go to new audio montage from current file, duplicate, customize duplicate, press create. And now it's going to ask me, where is this file? And I'm going to point it to the folder where I just downsampled that file. So it just recreated the montage. Now here's how the fast way I can do it. I can press my Stream Deck, it copies the name, it brings up that, I point it to the right folder, done. And then part of my Stream Deck thing was to copy the name, so I can paste that in, type 2444, because it's going to be a 44.1K montage, and we still have that 24-bit dither happening. So if I wanted to render 24-bit 44 waves, I would just replace these characters in the render path, hit render, and again, we can double check these files. There should be no surprise here, really. We'll go to the 2444 folder, same metadata, it's all there. So again, you really only have to enter this information once. If I wanted to make a DDP or if I wanted to make 16-bit 44.1 waves for the one distributor that refuses to accept anything better. I don't want to name any names, but it has CD in the name. So here's, I've done a save as, and again, these montage files are small, so it's not recreating the audio. It's just making a small montage file. I'll show you what that looks like in your Finder. Close the Pathfinder. So this is the whole folder. It's not too big of it's not really a mess. There's the original files and my original montage. I have a 96K renders folder with the companion montage that has that going on. The 44.1K render folder has two montages now. It has the 2444 version, which some people may want to render. And it has the save as that I just did to get down to 16-bit. And as you can see, it's a 17.4 kilobyte file. So really nothing to lose any sleep over. It makes your life easier to have these variations of the montage. So, and I may have done that quickly. So, but what I did here is once I saved it as 16-bit 44, I opened my plugin chain presets and just chose my 16-bit dither. Because, like I said, even though I can choose 16-bit wave as the format, WaveLab does not dither for you. You have to manually dither to the correct bit depth that you want to do. So that's why I've loaded the 16-bit version of this dither. So you got to remember to change the render format and the actual dithering itself to be correct. So now, again, this is one thing I really love about WaveLab is the location. This folder doesn't exist yet, but I can just zoom in here, type in 1644. It's going to create a new folder for this render. And it's going to put the 16-bit versions. I can close RX now. It's going to put the 16-bit versions in this folder. So now we have, a folder for each format, nicely named with the artist name, album name, and some kind of description of what it is, the bit depth and sample rate. And I'll spare you the surprise here, but if I load these in, they're going to have the same exact metadata. Now, if I want to render a DDP, if you're using my presets, it's Shift, and then you press D twice. It brings up the DDP window. And again, I just choose the last. I'm not going to render it to this folder, but I'm going to use that as a starting point for the name. And then I'm going to replace 1644 wave with DDP because that's what it is. And I've I already got the 16-bit dither correctly added. Now, Steinberg makes a DDP player. So if you need a DDP player to check this, you can go to the website and use the Steinberg DDP player. I use a different one for sending to my clients because it's a little more user-friendly. But this is a great place to check your details. And now you'll notice, again, if you think earlier on, this A is missing the accent, and that's by design because it's not really supported with CD text. Again, you can try to do it, but you're probably going to run into some display error somewhere. So I like to play it safe with CD text. So you can see the metadata version had the accented A. CD text does not, but all the other information is the same. And I've only had to enter this in one time. And even that one time, it's all pretty copy and pastable and automated. It's not like you're typing and spending all day typing. It's all pretty quick. So now I can verify that my DDP is correct. The artist name is spelled correctly. The song titles are correct. Everything's good to go. I can make a player, but that's getting a little off track. So the final step here, I'm just kind of working my way down. Sometimes I'll make 48K versions for my clients if they're doing video. So what I could have done in the middle there is I could have also downsampled to floating point 48K with my sample rate conversion of choice and use the Montage duplicate feature to make a 24-bit 48K version. I skipped that, but I think you would get the idea how to do that. If you wanted to make a 48K version, that's how you would do it. So now I'm still in my 16-bit, montages are bit depth agnostic, but I'm still in my 44 1K montage with a 16-bit dither running live. And this is a good place to render MP3s. I used to render MP3s from floating point audio, which would mean I would do another save as and call it 6444. And I'd remove the dither because in theory, the MP3 artifacts could serve as dithering noise. But if you've watched Dan Worrell's video called WTF is Dither, he makes a good case for making the MP3s from 16-bit audio due to certain playback engines. So I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but if you want to watch that video, just Google or search on YouTube, WTF. That's actually what it is, those three letters, Dither, by Dan Worrell. It's a great video. So since watching that video, I've just been making my MP3s from the 16-bit source. And to do that, this is how we do it. We choose my render preset. I like to do 32-bit, I'm losing my focus here. I like to do 320 kilobytes per second MP3s. That's basically the highest MP3 you can make, and it sounds pretty close to CD quality wave to most people. You can, of course, make lower quality MP3s if you want to, but when I make MP3s, I like to make this, the highest quality MP3 I can. So I'm going to choose that. And this is where we are going to choose the artwork. So this is the one and only time when I'm actually just working and not explaining. This is the one and only time I open the metadata window. And that's to add the artwork. So I go to Edit, Picture, use the plus sign, go to the artwork. Now, I mentioned this is a very small artwork file. I don't even know what it is. I just thought it was funny. And it's good for demonstration purposes because there's no name on it. But this is a very small artwork file, 71 kilobytes. I found that if the artwork file is about 600 to 900 megabytes, sorry, no, let me say it over. The file's about 600 to 900 kilobytes. That's a pretty good size for MP3. It's still going to look good, but it's not going to make the resulting file huge, because WaveLab doesn't really modify the artwork. It just takes the artwork that you put in and embeds it. And I've had cases where, before I knew this years ago, I had a case where I put in a huge artwork file into the MP3s, and not only did it make the MP3s huge, but some media players couldn't display the artwork because the file was just ridiculously huge. And sometimes clients are going to send you a huge high-res file, which would probably be good for their website. And I honestly don't know what the file specs are for distributors because I don't distribute my own music. But for the intents of putting an piece of artwork in the MP3 files, as long as it's under a megabyte, I think that isn't going to cause problems. And I'm not a graphics specialist, but I found that between 6 and 900 kilobytes can still look very good and not take up a lot of space. And again, this is just for reference. This does not go out to Spotify or Apple Music. This is just for the reference MP3s that I think a lot of clients end up using for download cards, for promotional purposes. You know, if you just finished your album and you want to send it out to a few people to check out, MP3s are usually fine for that. And it looks so much better if your MP3s are nicely tagged with artwork and it looks clean and you don't see a bunch of messy file names or no metadata or bad metadata. But anyways, I'm going to add this artwork file here and press OK. And now you can kind of get a preview of it in the metadata tab. So it's literally the one time I open the metadata tab is to add artwork. And if you're using my settings, it's just Shift and A. So let's say I had a different window open. Shift and the letter A brings up the metadata box, and then you can just add the artwork of your choice. You can only add one piece of artwork for a project. So I've had people that want to do a specific piece of artwork for each song within an album. I usually tell them that's not really going to be possible in the real world. And if they insist on it, that's when I do use the Meta app to just put the correct artwork per song within an album. But that's pretty rare. We're basically adding one piece of artwork for the album, which I just did. So again, in the presets section, I'm going to choose MP3, 320 kilobytes per second MP3 tracks. And I'm going to change this folder name to just MP3 version 1. Render that out. And now let's open up these in the Meta app and let's see what we see. As you can see, the Finder gives you a little preview of the artwork too, but when I open it up, it looks great. So if I was to open this in Apple Music or iTunes, I don't know Windows Media Player very well, but basically, if it's an MP3, you know, any reasonable media player is going to display the artwork and all this metadata nicely. You could also do it with AAC files. I believe I have a preset here. 256 AAC tracks. So this is something I haven't done in a while, but you could change it to AAC. Render those. Let's load those in and see what we get. So they're M4A/AAC files. Same deal. All the metadata is there. So that is basically how I do metadata. Now, I know this was an hour-long video, but once you get the hang of it, it's about a 1-minute process to do this for every project. Enter the information in first, enter it one time, everything carries over, everything gets pushed to the right locations. So if you're looking for some of these settings, I have a website called WaveLabHelp.com. And if you go to it, there's a presets section. And unfortunately, there's no mastering presets for like how to get a massive hip hop master or a big rock. These are really just presets for workflow stuff, like how to get the metadata in there and things like that. So go to wavelabhelp.com. You can download just the metadata preset. So if you have your own WaveLab settings going on, you can download just the metadata one. And then in your, the best way to install it would be to go to the metadata tab, press edit, go down to presets and go to organize presets. That's going to reveal on your on your system where it's where WaveLab is storing these presets. As you can see, it's kind of a long path. But what you could do is reveal it on your system, download my file, drag it in there, or however you want to get it into your correct folder. Then when you go back to WaveLab, you'll see my setting called JP Start. And that's that. Now, if you download my entire settings, I should have mentioned this. I'm getting a lot of cases where artists are doing they're sending me more than one song, but they're going to release them all as singles, which is honestly kind of annoying. But I made a little preset for that, where if you choose singles, what it does is it puts the song title in the album name. So you don't really have to worry about what the album's called, right? Because it's 3 singles. And all that really does is it, like I said, takes the song title, puts that in the album name too, because then when you render a wave of each single, it'll say the song name will be for the song title and the release title, which is how singles kind of work. So I haven't really thought of a amazing way to incorporate this yet, but basically there's a little preset there called singles for those cases where it's a bunch of singles, but they're doing it at one time, which happens a lot. So I think that's all I have to say about metadata. Let me read a couple questions here. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them in the YouTube chat. Yeah, WaveLab is a very complex program. There's a lot to learn. If you go to wavelabhelp.com, there's a bunch more videos about mastering singles, mastering EPs and albums, a few other topics, and they're all done using WaveLab 10, but now that WaveLab 11 is out, I'll be using 11, and honestly, so much, WaveLab 11 has some great improvements, but visually it doesn't look entirely different, so I think you can still gain a lot from watching those videos. They're not so old that nothing makes sense. There's really a lot of similarities in terms of workflow and look. There are some new features in WaveLab 11, and I did a whole video for that last month that you can watch. But yes, there is a lot to learn in WaveLab. That's why today I didn't even do any sonic mastering. This was just meant to focus on metadata, because there's been a lot of questions lately about metadata, and that's basically how you do it. So you just enter the information one time, it goes everywhere. I always say WaveLab is basically automatic with metadata, because you just, with the right preset loaded, when you start the montage, it's so quick to populate that information using the things that I showed you, and a little bit of copy and paste, and a little bit of thoughtful folder structures and file naming. I mean, if someone only needed me to make wave files with metadata, I could probably do it in a minute because of how easy it is to get the information in and out, and I've done it so many times. So it is very fast and easy to do it, and that's a huge part of why I use WaveLab for mastering, because aside from all the sonic stuff, it's great. No complaints there, but it's also so good with metadata, and I'm just a firm believer that if you have the metadata, you should add it, because it's only going to help. If you do it smartly and safely, it's not going to hurt anything. And there are cases where metadata comes in very handy. So if there's no other questions, I'm going to wrap it up. And thanks for watching. Again, wavelabhelp.com has a ton of information. If you're new to WaveLab and want to watch more videos or download some of my settings, go to wavelabhelp.com. We also have a Facebook group. It's just WaveLab users over on Facebook. That's a good place to ask questions. Aside from myself, there's other people that can chime in and help as well with any questions that you may have about WaveLab. But other than that, thanks for watching this edition. There'll be another episode next month. We'll be doing another live stream, and I'll be announcing the topic over in the WaveLab